those of you who don't know me, I am Steve Biondolillo, which is easy for me to say. And I'm a member of the board of directors of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame's Massachusetts chapter. And I'm going to be serving as the host this evening. And before we begin the festivities, I'd like to introduce the platform party, which includes all of the inductees. And I want everyone to join me in welcoming them as they enter the room from the rear. Thank you. Phil Grebinar, Stan Holmes, Ted Neal, Jim Peckham, Dr. Rick Sullivan, Alex Steinbergh, Frank Ball, Norm Collier, Carl Adams. Be seated, gentlemen. Thank you, everyone. Now, first things first. Now, I know that we've all gotten very used to Mike Testa serving as the MC for us at this wonderful event, but Mike had to attend a nephew's wedding in New Jersey, and he assured me that as an excuse that the nephew was a former wrestler. So he does extend his congratulations to all the honorees this evening. Now, as you might imagine, I've had many misgivings about my role this evening. I mean, it's hard to follow in the footsteps of Mike Testa, who is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts' larger-than-life special events guru. And it's even harder, as I think about it, to follow in the footsteps of Mike's predecessor as MC, who is WBZ Radio's well-known on-air personality, Jay McQuaid. But I had lunch with Mike last week, and he had a confession to make, which I think you'll all find pretty interesting. You know, despite his exalted status as a special events guru and as one of the top wrestling officials in this state, he's actually a baseball player. I don't know if anyone knew that. Played in high school, played in college, still plays baseball. And then, of course, Jay McQuaid, wrestled to the high school level. So, it gives me the distinction of being the first senior wrestler to MC this banquet. And I say that as a way of explaining a couple of things. Why my demeanor might not be as polished and elegant as Mike's has been these past few years, and it'll also explain why I'm so damn short. Okay. All right. Now, we are joined here again for the fourth consecutive year by one of the greatest singers in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Before we introduce, and you heard a little bit of a taste of what he was going to do for us, before we introduce him, just a couple of introductory remarks. We are here this evening to recognize and honor individuals who have fostered and contributed greatly to the growth and development of our beloved sport, the oldest sport known to man. And now, to sort of kick the evening off, as he's done in the past, I'd like to introduce a local legend. He's performed throughout the United States, Sergeant Dan Clark of the Massachusetts State Police, accompanied by Ray Cavecchio, to sing our national anthem and some other wonderful tunes. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, imagine, if you will, that the year is 1814 and this nation is at war. You're on board a ship sailing toward the enemy fleet, that same enemy that just burnt your nation's capital to the ground. Your mission is to win the release of a prisoner of war, a respected physician, and your friend. You board the British flagship, and after intense negotiations, they agree to release their friend. However, you all remain captive because of the battle that is about to take place. On the morning of 13 September 1814, the British fleet began a bombardment against your homeland, the likes of which have never been seen before. Rocket after rocket, cannonball after cannonball. For 25 hours they pound on. But through the night, you're able to look toward the shore, and you can still see the stars and stripes flying in the breeze. And in the morning, the bombardment ends, and there is silence. And as the sun comes up over the horizon, you look toward the shore, and you can see that the troops of Fort McHenry have raised an American flag that is so large and so grand that each of its 15 stars and stripes measure 2 feet across. A flag that is so magnificent, it cries out, "This is the United States of America, and we will never surrender." You are so moved by this show of guts and resolve, you write the following song. Your name is Francis Scott Key. And ladies and gentlemen, this is your national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. Please join me in reciting our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I usually ask people to sit, but if you'd bear with me for 1 minute, after the tragic events of September 11th, our friends in Great Britain did something that was never before done in history. At the changing of the guard in Buckingham Palace, they came out and played our national anthem. As many people may know, My Country 'Tis of Thee is actually stolen from their national anthem, God Save the Queen. And because Great Britain stands beside us today as our allies, I offer you God Save the Queen. God save our gracious Queen, long live our noble Queen. God save the Queen. Send her victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the seated. Before I finish up tonight, I'd like to leave you now with what many people feel is our country or pop national anthem, written by a great country singer, Mr. Lee Greenwood. This is none other than God Bless the USA. If tomorrow all the things were gone I worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. Thank my lucky stars to be living here today, while the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I'll know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend us still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA. Well, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I'll know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend us still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I'll know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend us still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the Thank you all. Mr. Raymond Cavicchio, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
It's breathtaking. There's nothing on TV tonight that is going to beat that. My goodness, how fabulous. So the whiny little voice you'll be hearing throughout the evening's mine. You know, I mean, I listen. That's a terrible thing to follow. My goodness. Yow. Okay. Here we are. Time to introduce the president of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, Massachusetts chapter, former Massachusetts high school and college wrestler, Dr. Rick Sullivan. Thank you.
As I attempt to follow in the footsteps of Jim Peckham as president of the Massachusetts Wrestling Hall of Fame, I find myself thinking of Juan Sebastian de Elcano. Who, I can hear you thinking? Elcano took command of Magellan's expedition that first sailed around the world after Magellan was killed in the Philippines. And it's only through him that we know of Magellan's magnificent achievements. But Elcano himself is completely forgotten. If I can play a small role in continuing and preserving Jim's efforts on behalf of wrestling in Massachusetts, I'll be greatly honored. After a remarkably undistinguished college wrestling career, I fervently wanted to continue wrestling. At that time, there were open tournaments of one kind or another almost every weekend in Massachusetts from December to the end of March. With this opportunity to compete, I was able to continue to wrestle for another 20 years. and I owe the men who gave me that opportunity an enormous debt that I'll never be able to repay. But all of us who have wrestled are indebted to our high school and college coaches, officials, and many others who've provided support of all kinds. We're here tonight to give honor and respect to 5 such men who have given much to wrestling. I'd like also, I've been asked to refer you to the program in order to acknowledge tonight's sponsors, and in particular I should thank Steve for sponsoring the head table. Thanks.
Rick, it was nice to be thanked by you. You know, when I was first asked to be the MC, you know, I struggled with what seemed to be the indelicate task of introducing myself as the head table sponsor. You know, like, what would I say? Thank you, Steve. I thank you. As some of you know, my firm sponsored the head table last year, but I happened to be in California on urgent business. And turns out that my 9-year-old son, David, who is here with me this evening in the back, he might be the youngest guy here, there you go, was on hand last year to actually accept a token of the committee's appreciation. And word has it that David actually gave the most appreciated, if not the best, speech in the history of this function. And of course, it was the best speech primarily because it consisted of only 4 words. And in the middle of what winds up being a much long-winded program, David accepted the award by saying, "Thank you, Mr. Testa." And that was it. So, David, I salute you and follow in your glorious footsteps the same way. Thanks, Rick. Okay. Tonight, we cannot be joined by the individual who has historically given the invocation to this evening, and that is, but I was asked to mention his name. It's Father John McLaughlin, a member of our community, of our wrestling community. Too bad for me, because he was the only other guy at about my stature up here on the program. But we do have with us to give the invocation a man who I have described in at least one piece of writing or other as a chiseled granite hulk of a man, sitting right to my left, Jim Peckham, 1956 Olympian for the United States.
At this time, would you please bow your head so we may share a moment of silence to pay homage to the men and women serving our country at this time of need, and pray for their safe return to their loved ones, family, and friends. Further, would you please join me in thanking the men we honor here this evening for their efforts, contributions, assistance they provided in behalf of hundreds of young men and women whose lives they influenced in a most positive manner in helping them attain their goals. And finally, may we express our deepest appreciation to the founders of this nation and the principles they established and upon which it rests, that has allowed all of us to enjoy the freedoms and opportunities we now share. Amen.
Thank you, Jim. And now we are going to serve dinner now. And just so that I'll give you the heads up right now, we probably will not wait all the way to the dessert course before beginning the speeches tonight, because it's, you know, it could be a long evening if we waited that long. So I'd like everyone to enjoy the meal. The servers are coming out right now, and we will be back in a few minutes. Thank you. The 3 Division I coaches that are here with us this evening. All of them have produced All-Americans. We happen to have, a small but high-powered group of Division I programs in our midst. I'd like to introduce first Carl Adams, Boston University, to my right at the end of the table. I'd like to introduce Jay Weiss from Harvard, right in front of us. And I would like to introduce the head coach of the former Boston College program, Rod Buttry, down in the table down here. I actually served with Rod. I was on Rod's staff for 5 years, and so you can imagine that we're all crying in our soup. But we'll see what happens. One more very important introduction this evening before I continue with the program. As you know, there is a theoretical end of the rainbow in this sport, or if you think about sports as a big pyramid, there is a technical tippity top of the pyramid. And we have the great honor this evening to have with us someone who has reached that tippity top. And, I'd like everyone to sort of recognize and honor this individual. He was the gold medalist in the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta at 125 pounds in freestyle, Kendall Cross. We strategically placed Kendall there so everyone could sort of air it out a little bit, and before we started up. Okay, the first meeting of the committee to establish the Massachusetts chapter of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame right here. Jim felt that wrestling in Massachusetts had a long and luminous history which needed to be acknowledged. He called upon a number of interested former wrestlers and coaches, and that meeting resulted in their unanimous support. And their mission is stated as follows, quote, to further enhance the stature of the sport and recognize those who have contributed to it. And as you all know, we're here this evening to honor those who have made major contributions to the Massachusetts wrestling community. The official name of the award is this. It's called the Lifetime Achievement to Wrestling Award. And hopefully later in the evening, everyone will have a chance to look at the award. They are spectacular, and you'll see that engraved right on it. And tonight we honor 5 individuals who have epitomized that commitment to furthering wrestling in our state. We're going to be recognizing Frank Ball, Norm Collier, Phil Grebinar, Stan Holmes, and Alex Steinbergh. Because of tonight's honorees, the Massachusetts wrestling community is stronger than ever, and tonight we are all here to honor these individuals whose names will join the growing list of Massachusetts inductees on the walls at the National Wrestling Hall of Fame in Oklahoma. Now, in my introductory remarks, I explained to you that my status as the first ever senior wrestler to serve as the MC event would explain some of my less than elegant, less than polished presentation here. So let's get down and dirty, shall we? For those of you who don't know what I'm holding, I'm actually holding a towel, but not any towel, the towel wrapped tight, just like me, right? The towel wrapped tight. This is commonly used in the sport of wrestling to tap the referee, okay, on the shoulder when the period has ended. In other words, when time is up. All right? So all of our speeches tonight, all right, guys? We're on notice this evening, all of our speeches. I'm not afraid to use this thing. None of you guys scare me. All right? There you have it. Okay. Okay. Tonight's first inductee is Stan Holmes, whose coaching, all right, Stan, whose coaching career spans 28 years, dating back to 1974, when he began the wrestling program at Bridgewater Raynham High School. To present the Lifetime Achievement Wrestling Award to Stan, I'd like to now introduce Jeff Francis, who's been Stan's faithful assistant, and Jeff will make the presentation to Stan.
I'm going to have to read this because this is well out of my element right here. But good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here tonight and pay tribute to Coach Holmes and all the other recipients. My first encounter with Coach Holmes was back in 1979 when I was a freshman on the BR football team. Stan Holmes was my coach. He led us to a perfect 10-0 record that season. About halfway through the football season, I found out the secret of his recruiting. During a break, we were out on the field, and Coach Holmes grabbed me by the face mask and said, "What do you do during the winter?" I replied to Coach Holmes, "I ski in the winter." Well, Coach Holmes told me, "Put away the skis, son. From now on, you were on my wrestling team." This was my first introduction to Coach Holmes' wrestling program, and I've been wrestling and coaching with him ever since. I'd like to run down a few of his coaching accomplishments. His career record in wrestling is 406 wins with 100 losses. I believe his 100th loss was to Coach Bossy, which he takes that pretty good. He has had 14 league titles. He's had 4 sectional championships, and he's had 3 individual New England champions. In football, as a freshman coach, he had a record of 167 wins and 15 losses. And he also coached the varsity baseball team and had a record of 235 wins and 130 losses. His basic coaching philosophy is dedication, hard work, and consistency. I believe it was in the early 90s. We were walking out of the Marshfield wrestling tournament after the first night of competition. Our entire team had been eliminated. Neither one of us was in a very talkative mood, and I asked Coach Holmes what we were going to do to make our team better. Coach Holmes was very brief and direct to me and just said, "We will have to work harder." I believe this is Coach Holmes' philosophy on wrestling and life. This is what he teaches the young men that wrestle for him and what has earned him this prestigious honor. It is my pleasure to introduce my coach, Stan Holmes.
Wrestlers don't smile. It was a great honor to be here tonight, to be here in front of my many friends, colleagues that we've coached in over 30 years of coaching against, and to be honored with the great Coach Peckham. I want to start off probably tonight with, I would love to have Sergeant Clark sing before each match. Because I know each and every one of you that have wrestled, your hair was standing up just like mine, saying, "I'm ready, sir." And I think that's what wrestling teaches us. Because if I went to war, that's who I know would be on my backside. All the men that are in this room, all the young men that I've had at Bridgewater, Rainham, it's just, that is my success. The kids that I've coached. To get this far and never have wrestled. I learned from Coach Peckham, sending kids to his camp, going to his garage, finding out what the rope of life is about. And that's where I learned. And that's where we strived to work, to get better, hopefully to teach them something about life. I want to thank all the kids, all the young men, successful, that came here to be in my honor. It's an honor to see all of them. I'd love to thank my 3 children that have suffered through me from all my wins, or probably more so my losses. Though there weren't many, I still remember my losses over a lot of my victories. But my son, Robert, who's at Northeastern, my daughter who graduated from Syracuse University, and my oldest boy, Robert, who graduated from Virginia Tech. It's an honor to have them here. I want to thank Bridgewater Rainham for giving me the opportunity in 1970 to come back, start coaching football, being an assistant coach under the legend from Bridgewater or Southeastern Mass, Hank Pearson, in baseball, and we started wrestling in 1974. And coaching football, we got the kids going, and the program is gone with leaps and bounds. So, that's my story, that's my life. Let's go fishing, baby.
What a nice job. Oh, what a nice job he did. Congratulations, Stan. I do want to point out one little detail, though. Stan said that real wrestlers don't smile, and what exactly is that he's doing in the booklet on the table? Everyone quickly turn to the page. Our friend Stan is smiling. Only Phil Grebinar looks like a real wrestler when you look at. He actually has the game face on, which is supposed to be on at all moments. The rest of you guys have let us down. Smiling pack of hyenas that you are. Oh, gosh. Before I introduce the next person, it's the kind of thing that we teach in the events world. You never do, but, you know, someone will be unhappy if I don't do it. That silver BMW again, 3281, parked next to Executive Glass. Oh, gosh, license plate, what is it, RW490P, lights on. That's the last call for you. I already did that announcement before. Okay, our next inductee is Frank Ball, who began his coaching career in 1961 and is considered the founding father of Melrose High School wrestling. To present the Lifetime Achievement to Wrestling Award to Frank is John Pulio, who is Frank's former assistant and the coach of the Crispus Attucks Wrestling Club and current Melrose High School coach. Thank you.
Thank you. Originally, when Mike Testa told me I had to get up and speak, he says, John, listen, you got to be short. I said, Mike, take a look at me. I've been short all my life. Good evening. I'd like to welcome the inductees, their families, coaches, officials, and guests. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Frank Ball as one of the inductees into the Mass chapter of the National Hall of Fame. Frank grew up locally in Brookline, where he was an outstanding athlete. After graduation, he attended Springfield College and later served as an officer in the Marine Corps. Frank got married shortly after leaving the service. He and his wife Vi have 3 children, Jimmy, Jackie, and Mark. They are the proud grandparents of 3 children. Frank started his coaching career at the Landon School in Bethesda, Maryland in 1961. His teams won the league championship 3 out of 4 years. In 1965, Frank took over the Melrose High wrestling program. He coached until 1982. Frank taught physical education at Melrose High and coached both football and track as well. He was also an MIWA official, and he refereed for many years. During his tenure at Melrose, Frank's teams compiled an impressive record of more than 200 wins. They were Middlesex League champions for 12 years, co-champs for 1, and tri-champs for another. In 1979, Melrose High School won the Division I North Sectional Championship and was a Division I state runner-up. Frank was selected Division I Coach of the Year. Now, Frank's teams placed second 4 times in the sectionals, and they finished in the top 10 13 out of 15 years. Frank was honored again in 1985 by the Mass Wrestling Coaches Association and inducted into their Hall of Fame. He was elected to the Melrose Hall of Fame in 2000. Now, Frank is considered to be the founding father of Melrose Wrestling because of his long-term development of and service to the program. He was also pivotal in developing the first Boosters Club ever at Melrose High. I consider Frank to be one of the very early torchbearers of Massachusetts wrestling. He was instrumental in promoting Massachusetts wrestling and not just Melrose wrestling. Now, there were a core of coaches in the early days of Mass wrestling that helped the sport grow tremendously. George Bossy, Lowell, Rick Moyer, Wayland, and Frank Ball of Melrose come to mind immediately. They were all graduates of Springfield College, and they were greatly influenced by Doug Parker. Some of the other early promoters of Mass wrestling were guys like Tug Crozier in Andover, Chet Steele of Westford, Frank Smith, Concord Carlisle, and in the private schools, guys like Heb Evans, Governor Dummer, and Dick Lutz, Andover Academy. I'm sure there are others, and I apologize to those whom I've forgotten. Frank Ball's wit and sense of humor are legendary. I'm sure a lot of people have lots and lots of Frank Ball stories. One of my Frank Ball stories is how I became his last assistant coach. We'd first met in '69 when I coached his alma mater, Brookline. I'd left coaching temporarily to go to grad school, and I ran into Frank one day. He asked, "Hey, John, are you still living in Melrose?" I said, "Yeah." And then Frank said with this deadpan exterior, you know, "Geez, you'd think a fellow Melrosian would at least stop by the room once in a while and work out with the guys." Well, I did, and the next thing I know, I was working for him until he retired. Frank's room was always open to other coaches and wrestlers. He would always find time to help other people learn wrestling. He didn't care if you were from Malden, from Saugus, St. Mary's, Wakefield, or Woburn. It was not unusual for us to have a couple of other teams in our room. If you wanted to learn, he would help. This is the example he set for wrestling. This is something like the Middlesex League. It's quite common now. Guys like Lev, Larry, Mike, Tommy, and Ross open up their rooms all the time. And I'd like to think that was, basically from the example that Frank set. Frank was always trying to learn new wrestling technique. He was not afraid to ask other top coaches and wrestlers to show him stuff. He was constantly going to clinics and bringing people in. One of Frank's talents, even on a shoestring budget, was the ability to attract top clinicians for a song, or in the case of Larry Trombley, for a little bit of shampoo. That's a story that Larry will have to tell you. As in the past, Frank is still active in the wrestling program. He's helped organize and officiate in our junior high tourney. He still drops by the room and comes to meets. I'll close with this last Frank Ball story. Recently, one of my new wrestlers' fathers asked me the name of the gentleman who sat next to him during our meet. I replied, "That's Coach Ball. He's legendary. He's been a long-time head coach for years." "Well," he said, "I've learned more from him in the last half hour than I have sitting here the last 2 seasons. The guy is a fountain of knowledge." That's Frank, still teaching and still an ambassador for wrestling. I'm proud to acknowledge Frank Ball.
I have to write it down, because if I don't, I have advanced stage of CRS, so I'll forget what I'm saying. Winston Churchill one time said he had a colleague in Parliament, and he said the man claimed that he wasn't a public speaker. And Winston Churchill, in his British accent, said he spent the next hour proving it. So let's see if I can beat his time. First, I'd like to thank the selection committee for this honor and the pleasure of being amongst its notable guests and inductees. I truly feel humbled by the experience and undeserving of the respect. Additionally, since my career has been spent coaching and not making public appearances and speeches, please bear with me. I want to recognize those who helped make this all possible. No coach can take full credit for his successes, because success requires commitment of the team, the dedication of the fellow coaches you work with, the cooperation of the parents, the support of the friends, and above all, the Boosters Club. To this end, I want to thank my wife, Vi, who endured the long hours, the ups and downs associated with being a coach's wife. I was supposed to introduce her, but she said, "Don't you dare." So I have to go on. I live with her, not with you. Next, my fellow coaches, John Pulio and Dennis Mulvihill. John coached with me for 13, 14 years. We had a great time together. It worked out beautiful. I'd take the beginning kids, and he could finish them off. He had 2, 3 circles, and I had the rest of the room. It worked out beautiful for both of us. They helped me build a solid program. They filled in the gaps lacking in my limited ability. John and Dennis handled many of the behind-the-scenes things that had to be done to have a successful program. I'd like to have John and Dennis please stand up over there, please. Also among the supporters, especially from the Booster Club, are here tonight. We have 4 or 5 original members, Mr. and Mrs. Saratani, Mr. and Mrs. Bernard. The 2 Bernard boys are both state champs for me. They started the wrestling, the Boosters Club back 35 years ago. And it's still going today. It's the most active club in the school system. It is important for you to realize that I got more out of coaching wrestling than I ever gave back. The association, the relationships I made through wrestling will always be with me. So I stand here not to accept this award for Frank Ball, but for those, excuse me, for those who were associated with the program. The achievement is theirs, not mine. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Frank. Tonight's third inductee is Alex Steinbergh. Steinbergh has made numerous contributions to the sport. Few in New England exceed Alex's success as a wrestler, and still fewer his contributions as a wrestling philanthropist. He's provided sort of more funds and more practical support than almost anyone in the state to the sport. Certainly Cornell and Harvard University have been notable beneficiaries of Alex's support. But it turns out, you know, I know Alex for 15 years, and these are approved comments. I'm taking a little bit of Rick's time, told me I could do it. And so I need to tell a story. You know, Alex and I have one wrestling accomplishment in common. We were both medalists at the World Maccabi Games in Israel. However, you know, to just sort of set the story, you know, Alex won the gold medal. I only got a silver medal. And, you know, we debate sort of the relative merits of these medals. And in my case, you know, I happened to wrestle, you know, in the finals, in the gold medal match, you know, a close match with the not-so-slouchy American wrestler by the name of Glenn Goodman, you know, happened to have been a U.S. National Greco champion, and, you know, for many years, the second-ranked 136-pound wrestler in the United States behind an even less slouchy guy by the name of John Smith. But, you know, Alex, on the other hand, in his gold medal match, okay, happened to beat the moose hide out of a now-forgotten Canadian wrestler who, at this moment in history, Homer Simpson might call a Molson beer-drinking surrender monkey. Okay? All right. Just say, fair enough. And, you know, we'll let the audience decide. But the main thing I do have to say about Alex is if you look at his picture in the booklet, which you need to turn to, there's only one word that jumps to mind: psychotic. I'm totally psychotic. All right. There we have it. Now, Alex is going to be introduced by Rick, who I'm cutting in on. And you know, this is all worked out. Don't worry about it. I don't want to get nutty. But the two of them, I want to let you know, are the two greatest wrestling philanthropists in the state. Between them, no one has forked out as much dough and practical support to help different programs. And I have a favorite Dr. Rick Sullivan story. It actually comes from my wife, Dr. Madeline Biondolillo, who is sitting in the back. Please wave. Okay, there she is. Oh, and she gets a round of applause. There you go. Okay. For a couple of years, Madeline had the privilege of working tangentially with Rick. She... He's a funny dude, right? All right. She was a coverage physician at Yeovil Hospital, which is a subacute rehab hospital in Cambridge. And Rick, as we know, is the head of emergency medicine at Cambridge City Hospital. So when someone becomes acutely ill at Yeovil, they're admitted to Rick's emergency room. So now, I'm not making this up. Listen to this story. The very first time Madeline had to transfer someone to Rick, she called Cambridge City's emergency room. Of course, a nurse answered, and Madeline asks for Rick. So the next thing she expects to hear, of course, is Rick's, you know, his polite, well-mannered, elegant, Brahmin, patrician, Dr. Fraser Crane voice on the phone. And instead, what she hears, and again, I'm not making this up, Rick shouting, entirely unmuffled in the background, "Hold him up against the wall. I'm going to hit him." True, actual story. You can verify it with Madeline in the back. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce Fraser Crane meets Killer Kowalski, Dr. Rick Sullivan.
I I actually don't remember the incident, but it is true that emergency medicine gets to be a contact sport on occasion. For the last 40 years, wrestling and wrestlers in Massachusetts have benefited enormously from many acts of kindness and generosity by Alex Steinbergh. Although he went to Cornell, he's given as much and more, I'm sure, to Harvard as he has to Cornell. And so many local wrestlers have worked for Alex's real estate firm in Cambridge that, as the program says, cauliflowered ears are thought to be an occupational risk in real estate in Cambridge, which, of course, in the days of the rent control battles could almost have been true. He's coached a lot of local high school and prep school wrestlers on the mats at Harvard and in his basement. And his unstinting generosity in many ways has had a lot to do with the increasing success of Harvard wrestling over the years. But I really can't talk about Alex and wrestling without talking about his own wrestling because it was so unique. He had a very good dual meet record in high school and a winning record on a very tough series of Cornell teams. But he really didn't come into his own as a wrestler until he came to Harvard Business School to wrestle. Here he perfected his signature move, which is the chancery. And with his ability to pin anyone at any time, he won many New England, Lake Erie, Eastern AAU championships, open tournaments at the New York AC, where he frequently won the Outstanding Wrestler Award, and was the Outstanding New England Wrestler in 1965. In one Wilkes Open, believe it or not, he had the first fastest fall, the second fastest fall, and the fourth fastest fall in the entire tournament. But, my favorite match of all time in wrestling was one that Alex took part in I believe it was the finals of the Lake Erie AAU tournament that was being televised on local educational TV in 1970, I think. He was having a bad night against someone that he had previously beaten. 3, 4, 5 times the guy got in deep on a double, hoisted him into the air, and and nearly took him directly to his back, which Alex just barely fended off. The mismatch continued. The score mounted with his opponent's fans cheering furiously for one more double. With each attempt, however, Alex thought he was closer to making his chancery work. With the score at 11 or 12 to nothing, with 30 seconds left in the bout, his opponent attempted one more double. This time followed by the satisfying thud of a back striking the mat and remaining motionless. The ref looked from one angle and then another and then another, and finally felt compelled to call the fall. I give you Alex.
Thank you. It was about just about exactly 50 years ago that I started wrestling in 1952 in a little town in Pennsylvania called 44th. And in those days, I was introduced to wrestling. I was on the basketball team, actually, when I had slammed somebody inadvertently to the floor when the basketball coach said, "Steinbergh, get into the wrestling room. They need you in there." And I stayed there forever. I came to New England in the fall of '62 and got into the Harvard wrestling room, and I was amazed by the quality of the people that I encountered there. On the one hand, there was Jim Peckham, it was wrestling there, and Rick Sullivan, and Chip Harkness. Chip, as you probably know, is the one and only Harvard NCAA champion, 1938. Let's give Chip a hand. All of these guys inspired me in a way that they kept wrestling after college was over, and I got into it. And I must admit, I haven't particularly liked coaching that much or reffing that much or anything else about wrestling, but I like to wrestle. And I kept at it, and was lucky enough to win some matches in the 60s and 70s wrestling with Rick, going around to the tournaments. And I think New England was, at that time, had this group of tournaments that you all have heard about it, the Taunton Y and the Attleboro Y and the Boston Union and the Boston Y and Lawrence and Providence, and all over the place. And it really psyched us up. We had something to do each winter before going down and meeting the real tough guys down at the New York Athletic Club or the Eastern AAUs, or going out to nationals, and it kept us going. And surprisingly, people from other parts of the country came up here, so it wasn't just the New England kids that were wrestling. I think it'd be nice if we could revive those tournaments and have those tournaments again, all-comers meets where people could wrestle after they were in college. And I sort of stopped wrestling in my late 30s, around 76, 77, and I was just about going to call it quits till the early 80s when I met this guy, Andy McNerney. And Andy was quite a wrestler, as you know. He was a NCAA place winner from Harvard. And but it wasn't just his skill as a wrestler. Andy taught me a lot of wrestling that I'd just never seen before. You know, it was just like a whole new sport again. You know, all the things I'd learned in the 50s and 60s and 70s were sort of distant. And so we had to start all over again with wrestling. And that sort of gave me a shot of adrenaline and kept me going. And I want to thank Andy and all the other wrestlers, and also some other people. I had a sort of another quasi career in marathon running, and Martin Duffy and Lincoln Spurgeon and some of the guys that kept me going there and kept me interested in wrestling. And now in the 90s, I got back into the wrestling scene at Harvard, and Jay Weiss got me excited again. He's started a team there at Harvard that's really not just regional class, it's national class, and whoever has a chance ought to go and watch Harvard wrestle and see the NCAA place winners and hopefully a champion next year. So Chip will have somebody to shake hands with. We're hoping Jesse Jansen can win that one next year. And we've got the guy Max Odom here, who we hope can push him along, if not get there himself. And I want to thank everybody who I've wrestled with all my life, and there's more of you out there. Mike helped me get me psyched up to go to Bulgaria in 1995. Wrestled over there, had a good time. Learned a lot about wrestling. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Our next inductee is Norm Collier. Norm's contribution to wrestling began in 1964 when, while working as a foreman for the telephone company, he began volunteering at the South Shore YMCA a couple of nights a week. Since that time, Norm has had a major influence on countless young men during his 45 years of dedication to the sport. To present the Lifetime Achievement to Wrestling Award to Norm is Vaughn Lovejoy, who actually co-coached with Norm for 30 years.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Alex and Rick were mentioning the AAU meets years ago. Well, there was one place they never made, the pet store. I used to take the kids down to the pet store before the meet started, just to keep them, you know, quiet. But it's my pleasure, from years of experience, years of knowing Norman Collier, practically my whole life, to be able to say that he's one of the greatest guys ever. And a lot of people think of him, besides wrestling and just as a person, he is top-notch. Quincy YMCA. Rick and Alex will both say he's one of the reasons, and Jimmy remembers, men like Norman Collier are the reason why the AAU was functional back in the 60s, 70s, and even before then. They donated their time Saturdays and Sundays, and for nothing. This is before, you know, and I really appreciate it, and everybody that has benefited from it appreciates the fact that his lovely wife, Marie, gave him to us for that. Again, years ago, I was 17 years old, and I thought I was quite the stuff. I walked into the wrestling room at the Quincy YMCA, and the old coach, Joe, which some of you remember, said, "You wrestle with that gray-haired old guy." Normie hasn't changed. He had maybe a couple more gray hairs on his. I said, "You got to be kidding." Well, it took me a year to get out from underneath, a whole year. And by the way, it was a canvas mat. And yes, if you didn't sit back, you got hurt. But Normie, Mr. Collier, it's my pleasure. And this evening, there's a number of people here who made the trip up just to say thank you very much, Norm, for all the time, the effort that you put in to help them keep the Quincy YMCA program going from the early 60s to the late 90s, early 90s actually, before the Y did away with the program. If it wasn't for Norman, the program wouldn't be there at the Quincy YMCA. There wouldn't be a place for these boys that have just come up to honor Normie to wrestle. And again, like Alex and Rick have mentioned, the AAU wouldn't have been the AAU if it wasn't for men like Norman Collier and the fact that his wife, Marie Collier, gave it to us. Thank you.
We're talking about the 50s and 60s. The AAU was going strong in the 40s and 50s.
Excuse me, just one little, Jimmy just reminded me of the 40s and 50s when Norm used to, and he used to wrestle. Unfortunately, Jimmy wrestled in the same weight class, and Normie was a little bit older at the time, and had other, Jimmy was training a little harder. But After the meets, they all went together and they went out for ice cream. Am I right, Norm? Yeah, but those were the days. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was told before I came up here that I could only have 1 minute speech, and I'm not a speech maker, but I want to thank my family basically for putting up with me. That since 1946 I've been down the Y wrestling, doing something, and my wife and family have put up with my 2 nights a week. And I also was working, and when what actually happened was I got married. My wife was feeding me so well that I went up to Jimmy's class. Before that, I wasn't in Jimmy's class, and I was able to do something. So I've been with the YMCA, so I don't have any records, or I don't have any things like these gentlemen here have. But I worked out down the Y, and we worked with the AAU years ago when we used to go around, as they said, Saturdays and Sundays, and volunteer our time to referee and clerk the bouts. So basically, I want to say thank you to everybody, and I appreciate it all. It's very nice. I never dreamt I would be here. Thank you again.
Thank you, Norm. And especially thank you for not surrendering the microphone to Jimmy. Hey, that was, we were all kind of getting a little nervous there for a second. No, it's okay, Jimmy. I had to tag you once. All right, that's all. Okay. Settle down. Okay. Our next and final inductee this evening is Phil Grebinar. Last but not least. Yes. Whose coaching career spans 31 years as head varsity wrestling coach at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, where he compiled an exceptionally impressive record. To present Phil the Lifetime Achievement Wrestling Award, I'd now like to introduce Steve Hall, former WPI wrestler. And there's a note here in my script that says there's a tradition at WPI that former wrestlers that have their firstborn get a baby singlet. And I think, you know, by the proliferation of Grebinar tables here, I think it's a working technique. So Steve Hall, please join us. Thanks.
Well, I don't have anything written, but just so you all know that I didn't shirk my duties, okay? I had something written until I got a phone call from Phil last night. Basically, I wouldn't call it a threat, but he reminded me that he spoke after me, okay? So, I think I'll make it under the 2 minutes, okay? I assure you I could go on and on, all right? You can read the pamphlet, okay? And everybody here that's familiar with Massachusetts wrestling is familiar with Phil and his accomplishments, both coaching, as a referee, etc., okay? And those definitely warrant him receiving this award, okay? What you don't know, and in my opinion, the thing that he really deserves this award for is the fact that he is the driving force behind all this, the family right here in front of us, okay? It's hard to fathom if you're not part of it, what WPI is all about. And my kids, I have 2 boys that have 2 of those little singlets, okay? And Dee and Phil are godparents to my kids, you know, and we have these types of functions and everybody, you know, shows up, and it is a family for life. And Phil is not only a friend, a coach, but a mentor. He's done major things and affected people's lives in a great way, okay? Now, this is a lifetime award, okay? And so, okay. I didn't want to get. I didn't want to let him off the hook completely, okay? So I want you all to know where this all began. Okay. Now, as a representative of the WPI family, I'm proud to present Phil Grebinar with this and the award.
Don Jackson was my coach. Don Jackson was my coach. Thank you. Oh boy. I've been looking for that photo for a long time. To be honest with you, before I get into my speech here, just to go back to that photo, my first wrestling coach was a guy by the name of Don Jackson, okay? And that's when that photo was taken, and that was at Grand Avenue Junior High School in Belmore, Long Island back then. And he later on left Belmore and actually went to John F. Kennedy High School for a while, and then he went to Smithtown East. And he produced some pretty good wrestlers. The Oklahoma head coach is one of his proteges that wrestled for Don, okay? I want to thank Steve for presenting me. He was a 4-year starting heavyweight for me out of New York State. And one of the reasons I'm going to kick into this mode right now is with Alex Steinbergh being inducted tonight, along with Jim Peckham being here, former Harvard coach, and Jay Weiss, who has just a phenomenal program, and it was really exciting refereeing for him in the past and what he's got going there. I knew there'd be a ton of Harvard people here, or Harvard as we sometimes say. So I'll give Steve a quick plug, since he was nice to me. During Steve's 4 years at WPI, WPI was 3-1 versus Harvard, winning 20-19, 18-27, 25-13, and 21-14. Individually, Steve, I'm going to blow some more smoke his way. He was 4-0, 12-3 over Kevin Waddles, who was an Eastern Place winner, 4-3 over Paul Weeson, a pin over Kevin Waddles in 3:59, and 7-0 over Paul Weeson. We have stats at WPI. There's other guys that were on that team as well. Sitting over there is Richie Testa, Stu McEachran, and Dave Parker. They were all part of that team. Well, when I was first told by Mike Tester I had 5 minutes to speak, I gave it some thought, contemplated it. I've been to 2 of the 3 past induction ceremonies, and if you were at the first one, the inaugural, you'll understand this. So I gave some thought. I called back to Mike and I said, are these Peckham minutes or are these Greenwich Mean minutes? I was threatened by my wife that if I talked as long as Jim did, she'd get up and leave. Well, I finally found out that there were 5 Greenwich Mean minutes, not Peckham minutes. Jim, all these notes, down the right side. Next, I want to express my appreciation at being inducted, especially at the same time as Frank Ball and Stan Holmes. I mention these 2 guys specifically because these 2 guys probably sent me more high school wrestlers in my 31 years at WPI than any other high school program in the state. Frank's Melrose guys included Frank's son Jimmy Ball, who's now a major in the U.S. Army, Dan Murphy, who's the creator of the Massachusetts Wrestling Officials Association webpage, All New England Eddie Ostris, and New England College champion Jack Curl. Thanks, Frank. Okay. Over here, Stan. Stan's program sent me a guy way back, was the first one from BR to come, Larry Rolt, Brian Wynn, Sean Corbett, All New England Rob Panza, All New England Lionel Bella, who would have been here today, but is home because of a death in the family, All New England Todd Wyman, New England College champion Toby Wyman, and New England College champion and All-American Paul Wyman. I could make a pretty good lineup out of those guys, but unfortunately, most of them now weigh in at heavyweight. Okay. Very quickly, the Grebinar story, because I'm not a native Massachusetts person. Came to Massachusetts 31 years ago out of central New York, where I finished up my bachelor's and master's degree. The names I was familiar with growing up on Long Island were guys, two of the most impressive guys that I wrestled for, Sprig Gardner and Ken Hunt. Other names that surfaced, and Carl Adams can relate to some of these guys, will be Joe Campo, Jack Stambro, Al Bevilacqua. Those were the legends that I lived under as a young wrestler. Then I got up here to Massachusetts, started to recruit, started to referee, was coaching, and I started to learn the original legends up here in Massachusetts, the Bossies, the Moyers, the Peckhams, the Croziers, the Steels, and the Walkers. Lots of great wrestling people. I came to WPI as a assistant football coach, head wrestling coach, and an assistant baseball coach. Thank God now all I do is wrestling. Okay? When we came here to New England, my wife and I had no prior connections or friends, and now due to the coaching, the recruiting, the refereeing, both at the college and high school level, and especially with all the WPI team members, okay, I got many acquaintances, and most important, great friends. WPI wrestling has basically been our life. Therefore, I got to say a thank you. I want to make a very important thank you to my family, because over the 31 years, if there was ever going to be a commitment made, it had to be by them, because they were the people that were compromised. I would do everything I can to take care of them first, but WPI wrestling was always their priority. So I want to introduce my family that's here with me. They've stood for what we've achieved at WPI, and they've backed me the whole way. My boys, and they're growing up, as Steve related to the boys, every time, my wife is the one that takes care of this for me, it's not me. Every time we have a wrestler who has a baby boy, we send out a WPI wrestling singlet, 20-pounder. And it's a tradition we've kept going. But my boys, because they're hanging around the wrestling room, they kind of were influenced during their formative years by my wrestling team. Sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes that's not a very good thing. At a very young age, my children were learning how important it was to win versus how bad it was to lose. So I thank all those guys for what they did. First off, my youngest son, Kevin, who's a fireman, is here tonight. Unfortunately, his wife couldn't be here tonight, and this is the first time in public I say this. She couldn't be here tonight. She wasn't feeling well, because very shortly, sometime in the fall, I'll acquire a new name, Grandpa. Kevin. Okay. My oldest son, Brian, who's a pharmacist, and his girlfriend, Tam, okay? He takes winning and losing more important than any other person I've ever seen. He can get mad at the TV set when the wrong team is winning. Now, my most important person, my most critical team evaluator. Can't believe it when I go home and she says, how come the other team looks bigger than your guys do? And I says, well, why don't you get in the weight room and make them lift? My greatest supporter, and most importantly, my wife for 33 years, my wife, Deanne. Okay. Stand up. Now, lastly, to wrap it up, because I don't want to take too much time either, and of great importance, I need to thank the wrestlers and team members who are WPI Wrestling. These are the people that did the real work. They're all out there. They're sitting around the tables. There's a bunch of them that were team members, letter winners, all New England wrestlers, New England champions, and All-Americans. On a quick count, I looked over there, and there's 8 All-American awards sitting at those 3 tables, okay? Most important to the state of Massachusetts, 7 of those 8 awards are homegrown. They're Massachusetts boys. They made their mark at WPI as students, as wrestlers, and now in the corporate work world. I owe them a ton of gratitude. Thanks for having made the commitment to me and for accomplishing all the work to make wrestling at WPI as successful as it is and to create what Steve Hall already referred to as the WPI Wrestling family. I hope that they realize that part of my induction tonight belongs not only to me, but to them as well. Thanks so much for being part of the WPI Wrestling family. Thanks to everyone here tonight for supporting the sport of wrestling. Happy Easter to all. Thank you.
I am going to ask everyone to join me one more time for all of the inductees this evening. Please, a standing ovation. I'd appreciate that. Thank you. There's one more quick thank you tonight. I mean, I hope everyone has noticed how well the program's running smoothly and on time. We've set a record for this evening, haven't we? And there is one gentleman who actually deserves all of that credit, actually drafted the bulk of this script and made the whole evening run. He's standing in the back of the room. His name is Howard Resnick, and please raise your hand. Howard, thank you. Our new hero. We're going to have one of our members of the board of directors do a quick benediction. I will come back for a quick farewell. I'd like to introduce Ted Neal, member of the board of directors, Massachusetts Wrestling Hall of Fame.
As Steve mentioned earlier, Father John McLaughlin, who has been at this dais for all the other inductions, is not able to be with us this evening. He is busy at his church, St. Mary's in Foxborough, with the Easter weekend celebration. He sends his blessing and is thinking of his wrestling friends. Bill White, inducted in 2001 at our last Wrestling Hall of Fame, died early last fall after a tough battle with cancer. To remember our friend Bill and others in the wrestling community that have passed away, please join me in a moment of silent remembrance. As our evening of congeniality, togetherness, respect, and admiration with relatives, colleagues, and friends in wrestling comes to an end, may the good Lord bless you and keep you. May his countenance be upon you and give you peace, both now and forevermore. Amen.
Okay, that concludes the festivities this evening. Once again, congratulations to the inductees. Everyone a safe ride home, please. Tell your friends that you had some fun this year, and please, try to join us again in the future. Thank you. Evening's over.